The dim glow of the hospital corridor flickered under faulty fluorescent lights as Elena Voss packed her small duffel bag in silence. It was 7:15 a.m., and the words still echoed in her ears like a slap she couldn't dodge, effective immediately: "You're terminated for insubordination." No cake in the break room. No goodbye hugs from the day shift. Just the cold click of the security badge being deactivated and the administrator's smirk as he reminded her that quiet nurses who question policy don't belong at St. Mary's anymore. She had only asked, politely, as always, why they were discharging little Tommy Ramirez, the 8-year-old leukemia patient, 3 days early to free up a bed for a VIP insurance case. Tommy's fever had spiked again the night before. His mother couldn't afford private care. Elena had stayed past her shift, holding the boy's tiny hand while he whispered, "Nurse Elena, will you read me one more story about the brave knight?" She read it. Twice. Then she spoke up. And they fired her. At home, Elena sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, watching 9-year-old Sophie sleep, her own heart heavy with the same fear that had haunted her since her husband's death 4 years earlier. Mark had been in this very hospital, misdiagnosed, sent home too soon. He never came back. Now Elena was the quiet one again, single mom, night nurse no more, wondering how she would explain to Sophie that mommy's steady paycheck was gone because she cared too much. But midnight had other plans. The first explosion rattled the windows at 11:47 p.m. Elena was already awake, staring at the ceiling, when her phone lit up with emergency alerts. Active shooter. Multiple hostages. St. Mary's Hospital on lockdown. Her stomach dropped. Tommy was still there. The night shift was short-staffed. And she knew every hidden stairwell, every ventilation duct, every blind corner of that building like the back of her calloused hands. She drove through the rain like a woman possessed, parking blocks away so the police barricades wouldn't stop her. Dressed in plain black scrubs she'd grabbed from her locker hours earlier, she slipped through the service entrance the maintenance crew always left cracked open for smokers. Inside, the hospital had become a war zone. Gunmen, 6 of them, masked, tactical vests bulging with ammo, had stormed the ER, rounded up staff and patients into the main lobby, and wired the ICU with explosives. Their demand, screamed over a hijacked PA system, was simple and terrifying: release the experimental antiviral samples from the research wing or they would detonate and release something far worse into the city's water supply. Outside, special forces had already locked the entire complex down. Black SUVs formed a perimeter. Snipers perched on rooftops. Drones hummed overhead. No one in, no one out. The media helicopters circling above caught only the eerie silhouette of the building glowing under emergency floodlights. Elena moved like a shadow. She had always been quiet, soft footsteps, softer voice, but tonight that silence was her armor. She crept through the pediatric ward first. Tommy's room was empty, they had dragged the children to the cafeteria with the others. She found a nurse's aide hiding in a supply closet, eyes wide with terror. "Elena? They fired you." "Shoo. How many wounded?" 12. Dr. Patel is trying to keep the critical ones alive in the OR, but they have guns on him. Elena's hands didn't shake as she gathered gauze, saline, and a precious vial of morphine she knew the gunman hadn't found. She patched up 2 injured security guards in a darkened radiology room, whispering calm instructions while their blood soaked her sleeves. One guard, an older man named Miguel who had once teased her for being too nice for this job, gripped her wrist. "You didn't have to come back." "Yes, I did," she said simply. "Tommy needs his story time." The hours blurred into a nightmare of muffled screams and distant gunfire. Elena became the hospital's unseen guardian. She rerouted oxygen lines when the terrorists cut the main supply to the ICU. She used the old dumbwaiter shafts, known only to longtime night staff, to ferry medicine and water to trapped doctors on the 4th floor. Once, she came face to face with a gunman in the stairwell. He never saw her coming. She struck with a fire extinguisher, the clang echoing like a church bell, then dragged his unconscious body into a linen closet and locked it from the outside. No words. Just action. But the deepest pain came in the cafeteria. She found Tommy huddled behind an overturned table, his small body trembling, for poles still attached. His mother had been shot trying to shield him. Elena dropped to her knees, pressed her forehead to the boy's, and whispered the night story again, voice barely audible above the terrorists shouting. The quiet night didn't need a loud sword, Tommy. He just needed to be brave in the dark. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she changed his dressing with supplies stolen from a crashed supply cart. The boy's fever was raging. Without antibiotics soon, he wouldn't last till dawn. Outside, the Special Forces commander, a grizzled veteran named Captain Reyes, stared at thermal drone footage in the mobile command center. We've got movement in the cafeteria, small heat signature, civilian. But the hostiles are everywhere. His second-in-command shook his head. Too risky for breach. We wait for negotiators. Elena didn't wait. She found the one thing the terrorists hadn't counted on, the old service tunnel that ran beneath the parking garage, forgotten since the hospital renovation 10 years ago. Crawling on her belly through dust and rat droppings, she emerged near the command post's outer fence. 2 soldiers nearly shot her before she raised her hands and spoke the first loud words she had uttered in years. I'm Elena Voss. Former night nurse. I know every inch of that building. I know where they wired the bombs. And I know how to get your team inside without losing a single hostage. Captain Reyes stared at the blood-stained woman who had somehow slipped through the most secure perimeter in the city. Lady, you're either insane or exactly what we need. For the next 43 minutes, Elena became the eyes and ears of the Special Forces. She sketched layouts on a napkin with a trembling hand. She described guard rotations she had memorized while moving like a ghost. She even remembered the exact frequency the terrorists were using on their walkie-talkies because she had quietly noted it earlier while hiding behind a vending machine. When the final assault began, breaching charges, flashbangs, the thunder of boots, she was right there with them, guiding medics straight to Tommy. The boy's eyes fluttered open as the first soldier reached him. Nurse Elena, you came back. The last terrorist fell at 4:12 a.m. The bombs were disarmed. Hostages streamed out into the arms of waiting families. News cameras captured the moment Elena carried Tommy out herself, his head on her shoulder, both of them covered in dust and dried blood. The administrator who had fired her stood frozen on the sidewalk, mouth open, as Captain Reyes publicly shook Elena's hand and said, loud enough for every microphone to catch, "This woman saved more lives tonight than any of us combined. If she's not rehired by morning, the entire city will hear about it." By sunrise, Elena was back on the payroll, promotion included. Tommy's mother survived surgery. Sophie woke up to find her mother on the morning news, being called the quiet hero of St. Mary's. Weeks later, Elena sat on the same bed where Sophie slept, reading the night story one more time. The little girl looked up. "Mommy, were you scared?" "Every second," Elena answered softly. "But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay quiet, and keep showing up for the people who need you." She tucked the blanket around her daughter and smiled into the darkness. In a noisy world that rewards the loudest voices, the ones who move in silence often carry the heaviest burdens, and the brightest light. And that, my friends, is why we should never underestimate the quiet ones. The night nurses. The single parents. The people who stay late, speak softly, and love fiercely even when no one is watching. Elena Voss reminded us all, true courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, patches wounds, and crawls through tunnels so others can live. If this story wrapped itself around your heart the way it did mine, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. It helps more people discover these tales of everyday heroes. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week I'm bringing you another story that will leave you in tears and ready to be kinder. Drop a comment below. Who is the quiet hero in your life? Let's celebrate them together. Thank you for watching until the very end. You matter. Your kindness matters. And in a world that sometimes forgets the quiet ones, never stop showing up.